And welcome to the live stream. I'm going to give it just a sec for the stream to catch up to me. But before we get going, I'll say today we're going to be going through this quiz, and if you want to take the quiz yourself, the link is in the description of the YouTube video. So if you are going to take the quiz, pause now, go through the quiz, maybe come back. Because obviously, I don't know, maybe it's not obvious, there'll be spoilers. There's just a one quiz. So I don't have like a special secret version for the stream and another one for y'all. I just made the one. So, welcome to the Rasa Livestream. So today we're going to be talking about the implementation design phase of building a chatbot. So once you have your, let's say, PRD, you know the sorts of things you want your chatbot to be able to do. How are they going to do it? Figuring out those implementation details. And a specific area where I've had a lot of questions recently and I've seen a lot of confusion is whether something should be a chatbot. Well, I mean, that's question one. Should you build a chatbot for your use case? But assuming that you've decided yes, then how are you going to structure the information in it? So should it be an intent that you use to capture a particular piece of information, a particular thing a user wants to do, or should you use an entity for it? What's an appropriate use for an entity and what's an appropriate use for an intent? So, little quiz. If y'all want to chime in on the chat what you think the answer should be, I'd be happy to listen. And if no one gets into it quick enough, because I know there's a little bit of a delay between me and y'all, I'll just pick an answer and then talk about it a little bit. So, the quiz has a bunch of different situations where you might be building a chatbot and we're needing to figure out what type of implementation you should use. So let's do it. All right, so we're going to start off with some pretty common use cases. These I would say are fairly consistent. I'm almost always going to recommend one or the other in these particular instances. All right, first off, getting an email address from a user. Is this a good place for an entity or is this a good place for an intent? And I'm going to take a sip of coffee, and if anyone is caught up, I'll give you a chance to put your answer in the chat. And if not, I'll pick one after I finish sipping my coffee. Oh, it's cold. It is not hot coffee. That's okay. All right, and I haven't gotten any responses yet. So I'm going to say entity here. I wrote the quiz, so this is a little bit of cheating, but yes, correct. I got it right. Yay. I would hope so. Email addresses follow a very regular pattern. They're very predictable. And it's something where if you look at a span of text, you're going to want to pick out part of that span of text. So that's a great place to use entity recognition or entity extraction. And specifically for email addresses, I'd recommend using Duckling, which is based on regular expressions, because you can do this with pattern matching. And if you can do something with pattern matching, generally that's going to be the lightest way, lightest weight way to do it. Yeah, Ken, absolutely. Entity. Okay. And like I mentioned, there's a little bit of a delay between me and the chat, so I'm still paying attention. All right, next question. Your user wants to know if they're talking to a chatbot. What's the best way to model this type of interaction? Should it be an entity or should it be an intent? One more sip of cold coffee. I think we have quite a long delay right now due to buffering, so I'm just going to go ahead and have an answer. And I'm going to say, let's just go with A throughout. I think that's just fair if I don't get any answers. So I'm going to say A again. I'm going to say we should use an entity. Probably not, actually. Probably not the best place for an entity. So one way that you can tell that something's probably going to be captured well by an intent is if there's lots of ways that somebody could ask for or say the specific thing that you are trying to capture them asking for or saying, right? So I could say, is this a bot? Are you a person? Are you real? Can I talk to a human? All those questions have that sort of understanding that what I'm trying to figure out is this system an actual person? And perhaps if not, I want to change what I'm doing. Yeah, absolutely. Ken and visual both said intent. Absolutely, that is correct. So also specifically asking if your chatbot is a chatbot and truthfully answering yes, we recommend you always have an intent for that. And also, I'd recommend a rule so that whenever that intent is detected, your chatbot's always like, yes, I'm a chatbot, and then you can continue on with your conversation. Yeah. All right, next question. A user wants to place an order. So this is just some sort of chatbot where users can order things. Is this something where you want to use an entity or an intent to capture this behavior? Another sip of coffee. Oh, it's so cold. Mm. All right. Hi, Faiza. Good to see you. So again, I'm just going to go with A throughout while we're going through and going answers. Hopefully you know what your answer is. I'm going to say entity, probably not the best choice. So right here, we're trying to capture people's desire to do something, and that's probably best captured as an intent. So the name intent comes from the idea that this is a way of characterizing something that a user wants to do, and placing an order is something that a user wants to do. So probably you'd want to put this as an intent. Visual Kwan says both. I see what you're getting there. And I think the next question will dovetail with that a little bit. And then Ken said intent. Yeah, absolutely, intent. All right, next one. And I'm just going to answer A throughout, no matter, I mean, I know what the answers are, but I'm just going to answer E throughout. All right. A user wants a large coffee. So is this a good place to use an entity, or is this a good place to use an intent? And a little bit of a to talk to Visual Quan's point that you'll always using both. So in this case, you'd probably, in the previous case, placing an order, every turn is going to be assigned an intent unless you're using end-to-end learning. In which case, no matter what you do, there will be intents assigned at some place in the process. This is more like trying to figure out how you want to structure the internal architecture of your assistant to extract the relevant information. Yeah. Visual Quan says, intent initially an entity to get to know what he wants to order. Yes, so I think I know what your answer is going to be for this question, which is probably A, and also I'm just going to answer A throughout. Yes, you probably do want to use entities here. So placing an order in general, you'll probably want to capture that with an intent. A good way to think about this here is when somebody ordering, they're not always going to necessarily say what their order is. They might say something like, I want to place an order. But the specific item that they're ordering, you're probably going to want to treat as an entity. So in this case, I think it was like a large coffee. One sec, let me go back real quick. There's buttons underneath me for navigation. Yeah, a large coffee. So I would say that that's an entity. You might... It would be up to you how you structured large, and I think it would depend on what your menu looked like. But coffee for sure, I would treat as an entity here. And Ken says, entity is the size, is a limited selection. Yeah, absolutely. Visual Quan's like, yeah, entity, absolutely. All right. So just sort of a general rule for you to keep in mind. Okay, good. I am just not covering the text. I'm trying to be mindful of that. General rule, entity recognition lets you get pieces of information that are part of a conversational turn. So if you don't necessarily need all the information that they provided for you, but you're going to select a specific chunk of the text, that's probably something you'd put in an entity. And also entities are really helpful when people express things in a really consistent way. So if people always order, coffee, and that word is showing up when people are placing an order, that's probably a good thing to use in an entity. Intents are a little bit different. First of all, it's not a, character level label where you'll label parts of the character string. It's an utterance level label. So you will label the whole turn that a user has. And also it allows a lot more variation in the way that users express things. So particularly if you're using Rasa, if you're doing keyword intent detection, that is a separate problem. But if you're using the Rasa approach and say diet, you can express an intent in a lot of different ways. So All right, so those are sort of the things that I think are probably the simpler use cases. Let's talk about a case study. So for the next section, we're going to be working with a single example, a retail chatbot for a pet boutique, like a fancy little store that sells clothing for cats and dogs. So keep that system in mind. We're helping people buy clothes for cats and dogs. All right. So, one of the things that the store owner wants the assistant to be able to handle is knowing whether a customer is looking for something specific that they want to order, or if they need a recommendation for what to order. Maybe if somebody's buying something as a gift, they might be like, hey, can you help me pick out a piece of clothing that would work well for this animal? And they share like a picture of their cousin's dog or whatever. I don't know. Whatever reason someone has for buying dog clothes or cat clothes. So I'll give you all a chance to think about it. All right, and I'm going to say entity because we're just saying A throughout here because there's too much of a delay to make it make sense for me to wait for the whole time. All right, probably not the best choice, actually. So lots of reasons for that. So one thing is that there's a lot of ways that you could express that you need help. You could say something like, can you make a recommendation? Or I don't know what to get, or hey, what should I get? Or, something else more general. Or you could say, I need a ladybug costume for a cat for the more specific order, or, I know exactly what I need, or no, I don't know, help. So lots of ways of expressing things. A couple folks saying entity. All right. Yeah, I see how you could get there. But in this case, I think an intent is a good way to handle it. So, this is specifically figuring out which of these behaviors the user is trying to do. And we are probably going to handle it in the same way if they need a recommendation, no matter how they ask for the recommendation. And we're probably going to handle it in the same way if they look for something specific, regardless of what they're looking for specifically, right? It's probably going to be like an intent to that, like order might be the intent for the first one, and ask for help might be the intent for the second one. So yeah, I see how you could get there, but my intention here was for it to be an intent. All right, so next one, the store owner needs to know the measurements of the cat or dog. So what size is the cat or dog? In, maybe inches or centimeters, or maybe, their breed sizes, right? Like Chihuahuas are all the same size, or Golden Retrievers are all the same size, or something like that. Give you a chance to think on it. All right. And we're going to go with A again. And in this case, yes, entity is the correct answer. So first of all, it's probably going to be a numeric value, something like size in inches, or even something like small, medium, large. Those are going to be very consistent. Or the breed example, that's also probably going to be pretty consistent. Yeah, excellent. And then Ken and Zainab also both said entity. Absolutely, I would agree. Entity here. If it is a numeric value, something like measurement in inches, I'd recommend using duckling to do that extraction. Again, it's just faster, it's just easier. And also something to think about is you might not need an intent specifically for providing measurements. So let's say if you have a form and you're going to ask for a bunch of information, you might have the same intent for each of the turns that a user has when they're filling out a form, right? Inform is the intent that we will often use in our example code. And you don't necessarily need to parse those out. You might use other ways of filling those slots besides having a specific entity, a specific intent that is, I'm telling you the size that my dog is, if that makes sense. Visual Cron says, intent, I mean entity. Yeah. Yeah, I've tried to pick some examples that are a little bit trickier, and you could definitely implement this in other ways. This is just my recommendations. All right, next section. So we're still working with this assistant, and that is a pet clothing retail assistant. So in this case, the store owner wants to know the name of the cat or dog in order to provide personalized embroidery. So maybe it's like a little jacket and it's got like, I don't know, Fido on the side. Or maybe it's on the label if the owner has like 6 dogs. They want to make sure that they can tell whose are whose. Just, these are toy examples. This is not a real example. All right, we've got a vote for entity. And I'm going to keep going with A throughout just because I don't have, I want to make sure that I'm being fair and consistent. So we're going to go with intent, but we do have a vote for entity. And entity was the right answer. So for names, I would strongly recommend using entities. It's a way to, extract a span of text. Yeah, we got some more votes for entity. Absolutely. It's a way to extract a span of text. For a specific person, their name is probably going to be pretty stable. Maybe not over the course of their life, but perhaps over, the couple times they use their assistant. And probably the easiest way to get a name is to ask for the name in the form and use a from text tag on that interaction. So whatever the person enters, they get that information back. And it's not linked here, but I believe Vincent wrote a blog post about this a while ago. And there's also a video on our YouTube channel about extracting names using this method. So yeah, excellent work so far. All right. And now we've got one that's really tricky, and I've actually gotten a lot of questions around this sort of type of problem. So hopefully this will be perhaps relevant for some of you. So a store owner needs a way to handle it when customers ask about the types of products they don't sell, so things that they don't have in their store. Things like food, training equipment for the dogs or cats, grooming supplies, or pets. They don't sell pets, but their store for pets. So how would you handle this? Oh, it's so cold. That was the last of it though. All right, so I'm gonna go continue sticking with my A guesses here and see if it is entity. Rob says intent. Okay, and we've got 1 vote for intent. We've got 2 votes for intent. Let's see if it's entity. It's not entity. Folks who said intent were barking up the right tree rather. So a lot of the things that I listed could be entities. So let's say like different brands of dog foods definitely could be entities. There may be a situation where you would treat those as entities, but in this case, you probably want an intent for when people ask about things that you don't carry. So a couple of reasons why this is really a better place for an intent than entities. Fabulous. Lots of people guessing intent, which is fantastic. If you are trying to treat the things that you don't carry as entities, that means you're going to need to provide training data or a lookup table. And the things that you don't sell at a store is pretty much an infinite set, right? There's, you're not going to sell like a brown dwarf, which is a type of star at a pet food store, right? You're not going to sell an iguana. You're not going to sell teacups, right? There's a large variety of things you're not going to sell, and enumerating all of them is a bad use of your time. And secondly, you're probably going to want to do the same thing every time. So no matter what somebody asks to buy that you don't carry, you probably want to say something like, oh, sorry, we don't carry that. So for both of those reasons, an intent is really the best choice here, even if you are handling pieces of information that in another situation might be better captured by entities, right? So yeah, a little bit of a tricky one, but I don't think I managed to fool anybody in the chat. Okay. And finally, I'm not trying to trick you, but trying to give you some food for thought to really think through these things. Finally, we're going to have the same utterance in 2 different systems. And one thing that I want you to think about when you're designing a chatbot and designing this implementation is that in a machine learning implementation, you are classifying the information that comes in into classes that you know about. When you add or remove classes, what classes you choose to include, they are not independent from each other. So every intent and every piece of training data that you give to every intent is going to affect the probability distribution of the other intents as well, right? It's all interlinked. I'm trying to come up with another good example for it, and I'm having a hard time. I guess it would be a little bit like, let's say national borders, right? So if a national border moves, so if a country's border moves, that area that it's moved out of doesn't like stop existing, right? It is probably gonna still need to have some sort of entity that it's a part of. So they might create a new entity for that place. It might be contentious. There might be multiple countries that say, actually, our borders are here. Actually, our borders are here. The country that it's next to might take that territory, right? This is weirdly geopolitical, but what I'm saying is that the space is going to have to be divided up regardless of, the fact that you move the boundary doesn't make the land that was formerly surrounded by that boundary stop existing. It still needs to be, assuming you're working in a nation state framework, it still needs to be assigned to something. I don't know. There was a little bit of a weird tangent, but hopefully it was helpful, right? Adding and removing intents, like adding and removing, let's say, countries or national boundaries, is going to affect the rest of your intents. I'm just trying to say it's a holistic system. You have to think about everything, is my point. All right. Next one. So remember, we're working with this single utterance, which is turn off the light, I believe. Yep, turn off the light. Okay. So now imagine that you have an assistant that is a chatbot that supports a single smart light bulb. So a light bulb connected to the internet that you can turn on and off using a second system, like a chatbot. Whether or not you should have this in your home, I think, is a second question. But imagine that you were building a system. In this case, what would turn off the light be? Would it be both an intent and an entity, just an intent, or just an entity? I'll give you a second to think. Water's empty. All right, and I'm going to go with my general pattern of continuing to pick A throughout. So I said an intent and an entity, but we don't actually need an entity in this example. So even though looking at, someone else guessed A, probably not in this case. So even though in this example, turn off the light absolutely could be treated as an entity. In this case, we don't need to, because our assistant supports a single smart light bulb. So we don't really need the information that we're referring specifically to the light, because it's not ambiguous, right? Any action that we do is only going to be affecting this one smart light bulb. Visual Quan says, great question. Intent, unless there are other things that also need to be turned off, then you'd need the entity. Exactly. Yes, that's a point I'm trying to make here. So you don't need to extract information as an entity if you're not going to do anything with it, or it's not going to affect the flow of your system, and it will continue not to in the future. Rob says, I don't get it. Answer A, if we want to add a switch or another blue light bulb later. Yes, absolutely. So if you know you're working on an assistant and you know that it's going to become more complex over time and you're going to want to extend the functionality, then maybe extracting light as an entity might be a good sort of defensive programming for the future to make your system more extensible. But if you're just building a hobby project, you don't need to do it. All right. Yeah, good thinking on this, everyone. I really like the discussion in the chat as well. All right, and now we have another one that I think we've touched on a little bit. So now it's the same utterance, turn off the light, but in this case, instead of our chatbot being very narrow, very small, it just controls a single light bulb. Maybe it's a chatbot built into the light bulb itself, potentially, with some sort of embedded system. Oh, I don't know that I want microphones in my light bulbs, but if you did, now think about a more complex system where you have a whole smart home. So it includes lights, it includes things like temperature control, it might include other things. Again, whether or not you actually want this is a second question. But in this case, turn off the light. Would that be an entity, an intent, or both an entity and an intent? And I'll give you a second to think. Okay, we got a guess for both vote for both entity and intent. All right. Got to vote for intent. I'm going to stick with what I've been doing and just go with A. All right, so just an intent, which I think is what I said. Sorry, just an entity probably isn't going to be enough here. So the utterance was turn off the light bulb. We've got a whole smart home system. Just using an entity to extract light bulb is probably not going to be quite enough information because we want to know what system will be affected, right? We want to know what the user wants to interact with. So yes, we do need entities, but we also want to know what's going to happen. So in this example of turn off the light, we might, launch a form if somebody says turn off and do some entity extraction. And if that form's automatically filled, then we, trigger a custom action to turn on or off whatever it is that they want it to be changed, right? So in this case, you need the entity to know what to affect because you have, a wider number of things that you can affect. But you also need the intent to know what to do, right? And there's a lot of ways that I could say turn off the lights. I could say, dim the lights, or hey, I want it to be dark in here, in which case I'd probably need to specify light taps. Or I might have a specific intent for turning off the lights. I might say, I can't see the screen, please turn off the light, something like that. So there's a lot of ways that I could express that what I wanted was for the light to be turned off. Yeah, and these two questions, again, are pointing out the fact that what you need to actually extract from the utterances is going to depend on your system, and it's going to depend on everything else in your system, not just the specific utterance that you're looking at. Yeah, and we got some more votes for both entity and intent, and one for intent. Yeah, and you need intent, but you're probably also going to need entity in this situation. All right, good thinking, everybody. All right, and this is this is the final question, and this is just for us to, well, me really, to know if this is the sort of thing y'all like. Would this be helpful? Do you want us to keep doing this? And I'm just gonna say yes. I'm gonna know that this is my results and ignore mine. And then let's submit and see how we did, only guessing A. That was a great effort, but you might want to brush up a bit on the core concepts of Rasa chatbots if you were only guessing A on this quiz. I think y'all, if you'd been going with your actual answers that you recommended, probably would have done a little bit better. And if you were interested in learning more, then we'd recommend you head over to the Learning Center. That's learning.rasa.com. Let me move it over so you can actually see the sidebar. And then we have a number of courses: Conversational AI with Rasa, which is our sort of introductory course. And also, if you're, if this was easy peasy for you and you want to sort of take the next step, then we also have our developer certification. And there's a study guide for here. This is all of the things that will be on that certification exam. Yeah. Great. So those were all the questions that were on the quiz. If you want to take it yourself or share it with folks, again, the link is in the YouTube description. I'll try and remember to tweet it from the Rasa account as well. I hope this was helpful. I know that this can be a little bit challenging, particularly when there are situations where you could do it multiple ways, and thinking about your system as a whole, how much variation in surface form there's going to be in the things that people express, whether or not, to put it very simplistically, is this a noun or a verb, right? Is it something that users want to do, in which case probably an intent, or is it a specific item or descriptor that you want to save and do something with, in which case probably entity, can help you navigate some of these trickier edge cases and try to figure out what's the best implementation for your assistant. So, oh, fabulous. That sounds like it was pretty helpful. Excellent. I'm really glad to hear that. Really loved it. Oh, Visual Quran wants more difficult questions. Okay, we can do the advanced version in the future. And Ken says really helps with the mental framework when working with Rasa and chatbots. Fantastic. It's really great to hear. All right, so that's all I had for today. If anyone has any questions, feel free to ask them in the chat. We also have, oh no, hold on, I didn't set up my Stream Deck before this. Is this the forum link? This is the forum link. If you have any other questions, feel free to head to the forum. We'd love to take them there. I'll stick around here for a couple questions if you have, want to take the quiz again. It's in the link. And otherwise, have a great weekend, and we'll see you. Oh, I'm not going to be streaming next week, so I guess not next week, but the week after next. I'm going to be out of town. Great. Yeah, you're very welcome, Zanim. Really excellent work, everybody. Sylvicar says, do we have a Discord? Sorry, that's my thinking face. I think we did have a community member who made a Discord. I do not remember the address, and I also don't think that I'm in it. Yeah, but I think there is a Discord where some Rasa developers hang out. If you're a Rasa contributor, which I believe you can get to through rasa.com/contribute. Let me double check. Rasa.com contribute. Nope, that's not it. Let me pop this over. Let me see if I can find, here you go, how to contribute. So if you're a Rasa contributor, we have a Slack for Rasa contributors. So we have that for the community if you're interested in becoming a contributor. Yeah, I don't think we have a Discord that anybody from Rasa runs. Yeah. All right. Thanks so much for joining today, everybody. I'm really glad this was helpful. I know that this is something that can take, particularly if you're used to, more older methods of building chatbots that are a little bit more rigid. This can be a little bit of a learning curve, especially if you've worked with keyword techniques, because keywords can sort of function in some of the ways that we use entities at Rasa and slots. So thanks so much. Have a great weekend. Thanks for joining. Feel free to head to the forum if you have any other questions, and I will see you in